Welcome to the fourth installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's audio magazine podcast. Ear to the Ground features interviews, reviews, and field reports related to sustainable agriculture, family farming, local food systems, and local democracy. I'm your host, Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. This Ear to the Ground will focus on what happens when a farm family decides to dig up a little agronomic history. What Mike and Jennifer Ruprecht unearthed on their farm was not pleasant, but it motivated them to work harder than ever at being good stewards of the land. First, a little background. The Ruprechts farm the rolling hills north of Lewiston, in southeast Minnesota. The land they farm can be prone to erosion and runoff, and numerous efforts have been made over the years to reduce soil degradation in the area. Mike and Jennifer have been farming together on this land since they were married in 1983. They raise grass-fed beef and pastured chickens, as well as corn, soybeans, oats, and hay. Their land has been certified organic since 2001, and their beef is certified as being sustainably raised by Food Alliance Midwest. The Ruprecht operation, which they call Earth Be Glad Farm, markets the beef and chickens through direct sales and farmers markets. Some of their products are also sold through retail stores in the area. In the mid-1990s, the Ruprechts were one of the farm families that became involved in the Monitoring Project, a unique initiative coordinated by the Land Stewardship Project. The Monitoring Project brought together farmers, conservation professionals, and scientists to discuss ways of gauging the impact sustainable farming methods, such as managed rotational grazing, have on the land and the farmers themselves. It is difficult to overstate the long-term impacts the Monitoring Project has had. The monitoring team eventually developed the Monitoring Toolbox, a comprehensive monitoring guide for farmers and others that's been distributed all over the world. The monitoring team's work also has had a profound impact on farm policy, particularly the Conservation Security Program, considered one of the most innovative federal agriculture initiatives ever. Today, the work of the monitoring team forms the basis for the Multiple Benefits of Agriculture project, which is measuring how diverse agricultural systems can benefit communities on a watershed-wide basis. On a blustery day in mid-November, I visited the Ruprecht farm and talked with them about the time they discovered the real impact certain farming practices can have on land. As you will hear, land stewardship permeates everything they do on their farm.
We had, as one of the projects on the monitoring team, we had George Polk, retired soil scientist from the Soil Conservation Service out here, and he had a 60-inch long soil probe. And we were walking out in our pastures, I believe with the intention of identifying soil types and such, and he was taking probes on some of the hillsides and finding out that we had about a 15-inch probe. The top 11 inches were the top soil, and he identified that as a Mount Carroll silt loam, which I was familiar with from my soil maps. And then a little farther away he found a 16-inch deep topsoil, which was Port Byron, which is the two most common soil types on our farm. And then we went down in the bottom of the hill, down the draw, or the valley, if you might call it that, the low part out in the field, and he took a soil sample out there, and he went down 48 inches, and before 4 feet before he found the original topsoil down in the bottom of the field.
Meaning that much soil had washed in from earlier farming practices, hopefully prior to the time we were farming it,
right,
but over probably a period of 125 to 150 years or so of farming.
Yeah. That was a real eye-opener to me, to look at parts of my farm, parts of my fields, and see that 4 feet of soil were laying down in the bottom that had come off the hillsides, laying on top of the original dark black topsoil that we finally found 48 inches deep.
Yeah.
And I know that years ago the farmers, when they first started farming the land around here and grew row crops, they check planted their corn so they could cultivate both north and south and east and west. And they cultivated 7 or 9 times in a season. And if you had just gotten done cultivating up and down the hill and you got a 3-inch rain that night, I can see how the topsoil could move, but it's just amazing to think that much of it moved.
That is amazing. To think about it actually, because it's not something you notice. You're not seeing big gullies in the land. You're not seeing a mass amount of soil moving in one storm, but over time for that to occur.
And I have always been very conscious of erosion. I simply will not accept any of it, but I've seen it on this farm years ago when we tilled fields and didn't leave a waterway where we should have, and I still see it unfortunately today on farms around the area here where they won't leave a waterway, or the fields are too big and it's all row crops all tilled at once, or they haven't got the hay growing because they don't have the animals that need hay. It's corn and it's beans. But we can't let the soil erode and expect to have something here in the future that's going to support our children and grandchildren.
You know, one thing I find really interesting is that in one of your pastures here, you have this structure that was built in 1934 by the Civilian Conservation Corps, and it shows, I guess, that erosion was enough of a problem that they came in and built this stone. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's a way to prevent erosion. But can you talk a little bit about that and how? I think the other thing that's interesting is it's obvious the thing isn't needed anymore. You guys, your practices have kind of made something like that moot. But can you talk a little bit about that, where that's at? And
this one we call a grade control structure, and I believe it was built there to slowly let the water drop down to a lower level without causing more soil erosion, which, if there was water dropping over a couple of feet, would continue to erode and continue to move backwards where that stream of water was running. And now there are 2 or 3 feet of soil that has been deposited on the upstream side of that structure. And of course we've got everything in grass down there now, so it's neat to look at, and it's got a real neat marble stone that they put right in the wall that identifies the year it was built, 1934, and the Civilian Conservation Corps from Lewiston, Minnesota, with their number, which I don't recall the number.
Yeah. But, was this farm owned by your family then at that time?
My parents bought this farm from my dad's first cousin in 1967.
Okay.
That's when I first came over here to this farm.
And Jennifer, you were saying that there's 3 or 4 others in this in that same kind of watershed.
The same, yes, the exact same water run that would continue from the dam, we call it.
Right.
There are a couple more structures downstream that are even bigger than the one we have, and they're in pasture land and trees now. Trees have grown up in them, but you can take that walk, and it's rather interesting to see what they did, and it would be interesting to know how they determined which areas should have them, and if at that time you could see huge gullies or just what the situation was. But it's unique to our place.
Yeah, it's really.
I kind of enjoy having it there now.
It's kind of a monument to at the time that was the way they dealt with conservation, was put in a structure like that, just like terraces and other things were put in. And you guys have kind of shown that maybe you don't need to go to those extremes. You need to kind of take a couple steps back and look at the actual farming practices and maybe the way you're actually, what kind of plant structure you have on there, how many months out of the year it covers it, instead of maybe putting in a Band-Aid type solution that keeps it from washing. It's a really interesting example, and it'll probably be there forever.
Exactly. I think we're interested in looking at long-term solutions, if you want to call it that, or looking at the entire ecosystem and seeing what clues you can take from nature as to what should be done there as well.
I wanted to back up a little bit back to 1994 when you guys had done those soil probes and found 48 inches of eroded soil down in the bottomland there. Did you, at the time, you were already doing rotational grazing and conservation tillage, good rotations?
Yeah,
did you change anything after? Did you adjust a little bit after that, or were you just more more motivated to do what you were doing even more.
I think it changed the awareness in my mind of how serious the problem could be if you weren't careful. I believe in '94 we had just completed seeding down another huge chunk of our farm for pasture. And so I took the last remaining cornfield out and seeded it down and had some 50 acres that I could now fence straight and more or less square, which is the easiest and simplest way to fence. But one nice thing about my pastures that I discovered a long time ago was how important it is to have a water system out there so the animals can get water wherever they are within each paddock. And my paddocks are about 2 acres in size, and I have a water system with just a simple black plastic poly pipe running out there under the wire, and then a garden hose and a float in a little tank.
Okay.
So wherever they are, they can go to that little tank and get their drink of water. If I didn't have that, they would walk either to a pond, which we don't have on our farm, or home to a water source. And as they walk, picture them going up the hill or down the next hill, and pretty soon you've got a cow path there where the grass has been denuded from the foot traffic, and then when it rains, the water runs down the cow path, and you've got a gully started.
Right.
So I've discovered the importance of having the water system out there, and now I can fence square, straight paddocks, regardless of the contour of the land, because the cows don't pick a path and walk. They spread out across their 2-acre paddock and eat everything generally within a day or two, and then move to the next paddock. And then we give our land a 20 to 30-day rest, maybe 40-day rest, depending on the weather and the time of year. And they come back in again. And that's also how we, one of the ways we're building up the organic matter in the soil is by removing the top growth with the animals, but picture the roots underneath every time. There's an excess amount of roots that help build the soil, and every time the top is eaten off, the roots can slough off and build organic matter and start growing again. And we usually do that 6 or maybe 7 times through a growing season.
And that's what I was wondering is, have you, since you, back in '94, have you been doing some ongoing monitoring to kind of really look at if you're building up that organic matter and the soil structure?
We did a lot of testing when we were part of the monitoring team project, and I haven't done a lot since then, but I've got things saved in the file, and I would like to someday check some of these levels again, and especially to see if the organic matter has increased. One thing I have noticed is that our pastures have continued to get better every year they've been in pasture.
Yeah. And I know you guys also, birds, you've noticed more birds, haven't you? More grassland species since you started the rotational grazing? And
I think I had seen a bluebird maybe twice in my life before we had an extensive pasture system.
Wow.
And now we've observed bluebird migrations around the 30th of September usually, end of September, early October. You can see flocks of bluebirds, and I don't know if it becomes a stopping spot on their route or what, but it's really amazing.
Yeah, because people are quite concerned about bluebird populations. They just aren't what they used to be.
We've also got lots of bobolinks every year in the summer, middle of summer. And that's a true grassland species that needs the grass from a pasture system, because all of the hay fields get cut 3 or 4 times every summer. And meadowlarks, both eastern and western, for some reason we've always had them on our farm, even before we had as much pasture as we have now. A couple of years out of the last 10 or so, we've had dickcissels and
numerous sparrows, savanna sparrows, grasshopper sparrows. What are some of the other ones?
Is there a Vesper sparrow?
Vesper sparrow. And I can't even identify all of them just at sight. But
little brown jobs.
Yeah, little brown birds, right? So it's fun.
The eastern kingbird, which is a flycatcher.
Right.
I never saw that one until I had cows out on the pasture. And that bird sits on the wire, and it'll dive off the wire and go catch flies. It's just a natural fly control.
Yeah.
Nature's way of dealing with something. A lot of farmers trying to find a way to keep the flies off the cows. Well,
Right.
nature has figured out a few of these things too. So
It's what you call a win-win situation.
yeah, they don't get all the flies, but when I first discovered that bird on our farm, it was kind of exciting.
Yeah.
I've also been observing butterflies the last few years, especially in August and September. Probably, I'm able to identify about 20 different types of butterflies now, which is really fun. And they just, when a pasture paddock is mature with clover blooming and alfalfa blooming, it's really amazing how many there are. You can just in one visual span see 100 butterflies.
Yeah. Wow.
So I'm hoping that we're making up for the supposed detriment that the BT corn has been to the monarchs and maybe other butterflies. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like all this stuff that you're seeing is I can tell it's adding a little bit to the quality of your life. You may not pay off economically, but you really enjoy seeing this stuff and feel proud that you maybe had something to do with it.
Yeah, where someone might have more entertainment value in getting on a motorized vehicle and riding through the woods, we prefer to walk our pastures.
Yeah.
Imagine having our customers come out and walk through corn and bean fields and see what's going on out there. It's just so much more interesting to have the diversity of the pasture.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have some corn and some beans too that we grow organically, but to have about half of our farm in pasture and to see what comes back, what nature brings back after a number of years, it's amazing. And a lot of our customers we do that a couple times a year, invite some of them out and do a pasture walk and go and look at the chickens, the laying hens out in the grass, and show them what we're doing here.
That's great.
It's amazing how many people are very thrilled to see the animals out on pasture.
Yeah.
They just don't experience it. If they have experienced it, it hasn't been up close and personal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know that you had Whitewater State Park, the local state park here. Dave Palmquist, the naturalist, used to bring people out here.
Yep, we take hay rides in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Now it's done more on our initiative than anything because we've got a good customer base, and if we can have people anytime, they're welcome to come anytime. But we sometimes plan it.
Did you guys? And so I just wanted to make sure I was clear on the history. You were when you first started farming here. Were you pretty much corn and soybeans then, or when did you start farming?
No
here?
soybeans. It was corn and oats and hay. And believe it or not, no pasture.
No pasture at all.
And we had dairy cows and hogs and beef cattle. And eventually we ended up with pretty much beef cattle, and then we added the poultry about 10 years ago.
I like how Mike always used to tell people that we finally figured out that grass likes to stand still and cows like to move.
That's a good way of putting it.
I guess
because you were hauling it, I suppose, with the dairy. You were hauling.
I always thought that our land was too good for pasture. Now I realize the best land for corn or beans is also going to be your best pasture. But we added the beans in 1998 when we started our organic rotation. We needed to have a rotation where we only grew corn 1 year because we had been growing it 2 or 3 years in a row. Now we grow corn 1 year, followed by beans for 1 year, followed by oats with the hay seeded down in it, and then it's hay for a couple of years, and then it goes back to corn.
Wow, it's a pretty complicated rotation.
And it seems seems to work. We struggle with weeds like every other organic farmer does. Some years you think you got it figured out, and the next year it's a surprise. But
well, the other thing I was impressed with when you were talking about some of the thought you put into your managed rotation system, it's not just some people who aren't familiar with it might think, well, yeah, they have one pasture for summer and one for fall, or it's just it's you just turn the cattle out. But it's a pretty sophisticated system. It takes a lot of management.
Absolutely amazing what a well-managed pasture will look like in September and October. And I took some pictures this year of our pastures in the fall and the grass-fed beef out there, and took the pictures with me to the farmers market to try to show people what 100% grass-fed beef looks like and what the quality of the pastures looks like. Because you can drive around in the summer and look at a continuously grazed, overgrazed, unmanaged, unrotated pasture, and what do you see? Thistles. A few other
it
weeds.
looks like
and
a
no
lawn.
no grass, because they've eaten the grass off. Every time it grew back an inch or two, they eat it off again. It cannot survive to continue to grow all summer. And then it has a very shallow root system also. We've got a diversity of 10 to 15 plant species, and I actually tried to seed that many because I looked at what nature does in a native prairie, and there's 300 different plants out there. So, diversity leads to stability, and we tried to seed a diverse mixture when we were seeding new pastures on our old cornfields, and just trying to imitate nature again.
Right. By the way, it turns out the day the Rupricks did this interview, it was their 22nd wedding anniversary. Happy anniversary, Mike and Jennifer. Here's to many more on the land. Speaking of time passing, that's it for the 4th installment of Ear to the Ground. If you'd like to learn more about the monitoring project, visit www.landstewardshipproject.org/PR/04/040201.html. That's a long one. I'll give it again. www.landstewardshipproject.org/PR/04/040201.html. For more on the Food Alliance Midwest Food Certification Program, see www.landstewardshipproject.org and click on the Food and Farm Connection icon. That's landstewardshipproject.org, and then click on the Food and Farm Connection icon. This podcast is a new endeavor for the Land Stewardship Project, and we'd like to hear from you. You can send your comments, criticisms, and suggestions to me, Brian DeVore, at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org. That's bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org. You can also get me on the horn at 612-729-6294. That's 612-729-6294. A special thank you goes out to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician and LSP staffer who provided Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a very special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member and would like to support us, go to landstewardshipproject.org to learn how to join LSP. Thanks for listening.